The night was heavy with tension as the small unit of soldiers crouched low in the tall grass, their breaths shallow, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. The enemy had surrounded them hours ago, pushing them back from the rocky hills into the wide, open field where there was little cover. Captain Marcus Hayes, a man hardened by years of combat, scanned the darkness through his night vision goggles, his heart pounding. They had started the mission with 20 men, but now only 7 remained, each one wounded or barely clinging to consciousness. Their ammunition was running dangerously low, their radios had been jammed, and their extraction helicopter had been shot down before it could reach them. The enemy, a ruthless band of mercenaries who knew the terrain far better than they did, was closing in, confident they had their prey trapped like rats. The distant sound of footsteps and guttural voices grew louder, sending a chill through the unit. Marcus clenched his jaw, whispering to his men to stay silent, to hold their fire until absolutely necessary. Private Cole, the youngest of the group, bit back a sob as he clutched his rifle, blood seeping from a wound on his shoulder. Beside him, Sergeant Reyes was barely conscious, leaning against a broken tree stump, his face pale and glistening with sweat. Marcus knew they couldn't survive another direct assault. The grass around them swayed in the night breeze, but there was an odd stillness beyond that, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Then it came, a flicker of movement Marcus almost missed, a shape low to the ground, rising silently from the very earth. At first he thought it was a trick of the darkness, some wild animal disturbed by the fighting, but as the form grew taller, darker and more defined, his blood ran cold. It was a man, or at least it looked like one, cloaked entirely in black, blending so perfectly with the night that Marcus couldn't tell where the shadow ended and the figure began. The stranger moved with unnatural grace, gliding through the grass without a sound. Marcus opened his mouth to warn his men, but before he could speak, the first enemy patrol stumbled into view, their flashlights cutting jagged beams through the darkness. There were at least 15 of them, laughing and jeering as they spread out to search the field. Marcus raised his rifle, prepared to make a last stand, but then the shadow moved. It was like watching smoke come alive. One moment the figure was crouched low, the next it was among the enemy soldiers, moving so fast Marcus couldn't follow. The air filled with muffled cries and the sickening sound of blades slicing through flesh. In less than 30 seconds, every single enemy in that patrol lay silent on the ground, their bodies sprawled in unnatural angles, their flashlights extinguished. Marcus and his men stared in stunned silence, too shocked even to breathe. The shadow turned toward them and Marcus's heart froze. He expected an attack, but the figure simply stood there, head tilted slightly as if assessing them. Even through the darkness, Marcus could feel the weight of its gaze. Slowly, it raised one gloved hand and pointed toward the west, where a narrow ravine cut through the hills. Marcus realized it was giving them an escape route. Before he could react, the shadow melted back into the grass, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. For a moment, Marcus wondered if they had imagined it, some shared hallucination born of exhaustion and fear, but the dead bodies scattered across the field told him it had been very real. There was no time to question it. The rest of the enemy force would be on them soon, drawn by the sudden silence. Marcus whispered hoarsely to his men to move, helping Reyes to his feet and motioning for Cole and the others to follow. They crept westward, staying low, every step agonizingly slow. Behind them, shouts erupted as the enemy discovered the carnage. Gunfire rattled in the distance, flares arced into the sky, bathing the field in harsh red light. Marcus pushed his unit harder, fear driving them forward. They reached the edge of the ravine just as bullets began tearing through the grass around them. Sliding down the steep slope, they tumbled into the narrow trench below, gasping for breath. Cole clutched Marcus's sleeve, eyes wide. "Sir, what was that thing?" he whispered. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't know. All he knew was that something out there had saved them, something that fought like no man he'd ever seen. As they staggered deeper into the ravine, Marcus heard it again, the soft whisper of movement above them. He glanced up and caught a glimpse of the shadow keeping pace along the ridge, watching over them like a silent guardian. Relief flooded through him, mixed with unease. Whatever it wasn't done with them yet. The ravine twisted and turned like a serpent beneath the moonlight, its jagged walls casting deep shadows that seemed to swallow the remaining soldiers whole as they stumbled through the uneven terrain. Marcus pushed forward with a grim determination, supporting Sergeant Reyes with one arm while keeping his rifle in the other, his ears tuned to every distant sound of pursuit. Behind him, Private Cole and the other survivors struggled to keep pace, their boots slipping on loose rocks, their breath ragged. The enemy was furious now, Their angry shouts echoed through the night, mingling with the sporadic bursts of automatic gunfire as they tried to flush the unit out. Flares continued to light up the sky, washing the world in pulses of red and white, yet every time Marcus looked up to the ridges, he caught fleeting glimpses of that same dark figure, moving like smoke across the high ground, always a step ahead, always watching. The more he saw it, the more a cold unease gripped him. Whoever, or whatever, it wasn't human, at least not entirely. No man could move like that, completely silent, faster than the eye could track. Marcus didn't have the luxury of pondering its nature. His priority was getting his men to safety. As they reached a narrow bend in the ravine, Marcus signaled for a halt. The group huddled together, their faces pale in the dim light. Sergeant Reyes was fading fast, his breath shallow and wet-sounding. Marcus crouched beside him, tearing open a field bandage and pressing it to the worst of Reyes's wounds. "Stay with me, Sarge," he muttered, his voice low but fierce. Reyes's eyes fluttered open for a moment, glassy with pain. "Just leave me," he rasped. "You know I'm slowing you down." Marcus shook his head violently. "Not a chance. You've carried all of us through worse than this." He turned to Cole. "How much ammo do we have left?" Cole fumbled with his gear, counting quickly before answering, his voice trembling. "Maybe 3 mags total between all of us. Not enough for a fight." Marcus cursed under his breath. They were nearly defenseless, trapped in a twisting ravine with enemies closing in from every direction. The sound of movement reached them, a rustling, deliberate and precise, not the chaotic stomping of the enemy patrols. Marcus froze, his hand tightening on his rifle, and motioned for silence. From the darkness ahead, the shadow figure emerged again, materializing from the mist like a phantom. The soldiers recoiled instinctively, fear etched on their faces. The figure stood at the mouth of a narrow passage, its posture calm yet impossibly imposing. It raised one hand slowly, palm outward, in what Marcus guessed was a gesture for them to follow. Cole shook his head violently, whispering, "Sir, we can't just go with that thing. We don't even know what it is." Marcus's jaw clenched. "We don't have a choice. The enemy knows where we are, and if we stay here we die." Without waiting for further protest, he adjusted his grip on Reyes and began moving toward the figure. Reluctantly, the others followed, glancing over their shoulders as they went. The passage was barely wide enough for a single man to pass through at a time, the walls closing in around them. Marcus felt a rush of claustrophobia as they moved deeper into the earth, the air growing colder and damper. The shadow glided ahead of them, leading without a sound, its dark cloak brushing against the stone without leaving so much as an echo. After what felt like an eternity, the narrow tunnel opened into a hidden cavern, its walls covered in strange markings that shimmered faintly in the dim light filtering from cracks above. The sight was otherworldly, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Cole let out a soft gasp. Where are we?" Marcus didn't answer, his mind spinning with questions he couldn't afford to dwell on. The shadow stopped at the center of the cavern and turned to face them. Even now, Marcus couldn't make out its face beneath the dark hood, only the faint glimmer of eyes reflecting the sparse light. Then, to their astonishment, the figure spoke, not with words, but with a low, resonant sound that seemed to bypass their ears and echo directly inside their skulls. Marcus staggered slightly, clutching his head. Images flashed before his eyes. A battlefield long ago, soldiers wearing ancient armor, rivers of blood soaking the ground. A promise made, a duty sworn, a curse bound to the land itself. When the vision faded, Marcus was left gasping, his heart pounding. The meaning was clear, even without spoken language. This being was a guardian, tied to this place for centuries, emerging only when outsiders threatened to desecrate it. The mercenaries who had hunted Marcus's unit were not just after them. They were searching for something hidden here, something dangerous enough to awaken the shadow. Cole dropped to his knees, trembling. "Sir, I think it wants us to fight with it," he whispered, his voice shaking. Marcus's mind raced. If the shadow was truly an ally, they might have a chance to survive. But trusting it meant throwing themselves into a battle they barely understood. Before he could decide, the sound of enemy voices grew louder, echoing down the tunnel they had come through. The mercenaries were close. The shadow moved swiftly, gliding to the tunnel entrance and kneeling, its hands spreading across the stone floor. A deep rumble shook the cavern, and Marcus watched in stunned awe as sections of rock shifted and rearranged, creating choke points and traps. It was like the earth itself was obeying the shadow's will. Marcus snapped back to reality. "Positions," he barked, his voice hoarse but commanding. Cole and the others scrambled into cover behind jagged outcroppings of rock, raising their rifles. They had almost no ammunition, but if they timed their shots carefully they could make every bullet count. Marcus crouched beside Reyes, pressing a pistol into the wounded man's hand. "Stay low and don't waste a shot unless you have to." Reyes gave a weak nod, determination flickering in his pain-filled eyes. The first wave of mercenaries burst into the cavern, their flashlights sweeping wildly. For a heartbeat, they froze at the sight of the strange markings and the towering shadow figure. Then chaos erupted. Gunfire roared, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Marcus fired in short, precise bursts, each shot dropping a target. The shadow moved like a storm, weaving between enemies, its bladed weapons flashing in the dim light. Marcus had seen deadly fighters before, but this was something beyond human skill. The figure seemed to anticipate every move, striking with a brutal elegance that left no room for counterattack. Bodies fell one after another, but more mercenaries poured in, driven by greed and desperation. As the battle raged, Marcus felt a strange connection growing between himself and the shadow, as if their actions were somehow linked. When he moved, it seemed to move in sync, covering his blind spots, protecting his men. For the first time that night, Marcus felt a spark of hope. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore, they were part of something larger, something ancient. But hope was fragile. A sudden explosion rocked the cavern as the enemy hurled grenades into their midst. Marcus dove, dragging Reyes to safety as shrapnel tore through the air. Cole screamed as a fragment struck his leg, knocking him to the ground. Marcus's heart lurched, but before he could reach him, the shadow was there, its cloak wrapping around Cole like a shield. The blast rolled harmlessly off the dark fabric, leaving the boy unharmed. When the smoke cleared, only a handful of mercenaries remained, their faces twisted with terror. They turned to flee, but the shadow gave a low, chilling sound that froze them in place. Marcus seized the moment, rising to his feet. "This ends now," he shouted, and with a final coordinated strike he and the shadow ended the fight. Silence fell over the cavern, broken only by the ragged breaths of Marcus's men. The floor was littered with bodies, the walls stained with the evidence of the brutal battle. Marcus staggered, his limbs trembling, and turned to face the shadow. "What are you?" he whispered, awe and fear mingling in his voice. The figure tilted its head, then slowly pointed toward the far side of the cavern, where a dark tunnel yawned like the mouth of some great beast. Marcus understood. The fight wasn't over. The mercenaries had been after something hidden deeper within, and now it was up to them, and their mysterious ally, to stop it before it was unleashed. Marcus stared into the yawning black tunnel the shadow had pointed to, his pulse hammering in his ears. The air that seeped from it was cold and metallic, carrying with it a strange, almost electric hum that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He tightened his grip on his rifle even though he knew they were nearly out of ammunition, his mind racing with questions he couldn't afford to ask. Behind him, Cole groaned in pain as he tried to sit up, clutching his wounded leg. Reyes coughed weakly, blood flecking his lips, while the remaining 3 soldiers sat in stunned silence amid the carnage. The cavern reeked of gunpowder and death, the bodies of the mercenaries sprawled across the uneven stone like broken dolls. Marcus knew they couldn't stay here. More enemy forces would come eventually, drawn by the sounds of battle. Whatever lay beyond that tunnel, it was where their answers would be found and maybe, just maybe, their salvation. He turned to his men, forcing his voice to stay steady. "We move now. Cole, you'll have to lean on Jackson. Reyes, I'll take you myself. Stay sharp, stay quiet, and don't look back." Cole's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear, but he nodded. "Sir, what if it's a trap?" Marcus glanced at the shadow, who stood utterly motionless, its hooded head tilted slightly as though listening to something none of them could hear. "If it wanted us dead, we wouldn't be standing here," Marcus said grimly. "Now move." The trek into the tunnel was suffocating. The walls were slick with moisture, the air growing colder with every step. Their boots splashed through shallow pools of water, each sound amplified tenfold in the oppressive silence. The only light came from a faint eerie glow that seemed to emanate from veins of some mineral running through the rock, casting everything in shades of blue and silver. Marcus kept one eye on the shadow figure as it glided ahead of them, its movements silent and otherworldly. He couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just leading them deeper underground, but toward some purpose it had yet to reveal. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel widened into a vast underground chamber. The ceiling soared high above them, lost in darkness, while the floor was covered in intricate carvings that seemed to pulse faintly with the same strange light. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone structure, like an altar or pedestal, and atop it rested a small, metallic object that seemed completely out of place amid the ancient surroundings. It was shaped like a cube, its surface etched with runes that shifted and changed when viewed from different angles. Even from a distance, Marcus could feel the energy radiating from it, a low thrumming that resonated in his bones. "What the hell is that?" Jackson whispered, his voice hoarse with awe and fear. Marcus didn't answer. He was too busy watching the shadow, which had knelt before the pedestal in a posture that seemed almost reverent. Images and impressions surged unbidden into Marcus's mind, just as before. A time long past when a great power had been sealed away to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. The shadow had been bound here, its sole purpose to guard the relic from those who would use it for destruction. The mercenaries hadn't just been chasing Marcus's unit, they had been seeking this artifact, and now Marcus realized why. In the wrong hands it could reshape the world. As the vision faded, Marcus staggered slightly, gripping his head. "Sir?" Cole asked, alarmed. Marcus steadied himself, gritting his teeth. "They were after that cube. Whatever it is, it's dangerous. That's why this guardian exists. It's been fighting to keep it hidden." Cole swallowed hard. "Then we destroy it. End this before anyone else dies." Marcus looked at the cube, its glow intensifying as though in response to their presence. "It's not that simple. I don't think it can be destroyed. It has to stay here, sealed away." Before he could say more, a deep rumbling echoed through the chamber, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots and weapons clattering in the distance. The mercenaries were coming again, and this time it sounded like an entire battalion. Marcus's stomach twisted. They were cornered, and there was no way out but the tunnel they'd come through. The shadow rose slowly, its head turning toward the approaching sound. It didn't move with panic or fear. Instead, it exuded a cold, almost regal determination. Marcus realized with a jolt that it was ready to fight to the death to protect the artifact, even if it meant being buried here forever. Marcus's soldiers exchanged terrified glances. "Sir, we can't fight them all," Jackson said, his voice shaking. "We don't even have enough ammo for a skirmish." Marcus's mind raced. There had to be another way. His gaze fell on the carvings on the floor, the intricate patterns that seemed to ripple like water under the glowing light. A memory surfaced from the vision the shadow had shared. These markings weren't just decorative, they were part of a mechanism, a seal that could close the chamber permanently. If activated, it would trap the artifact, the shadow, and anyone inside. Marcus's heart pounded. It was a suicide play, but it might be their only chance to stop the mercenaries. He turned to his men, his face grim. "Listen up. If they get that cube, the whole world is at risk. We can't let them have it, no matter the cost. There's a way to seal this chamber, but someone has to stay behind to trigger it." Cole's eyes widened in horror. "Sir, you can't mean—" "I mean exactly that," Marcus snapped. "I'll do it. The rest of you will get out and live." Reyes, pale and weak, shook his head violently. "No, Marcus. You've led us this far. Let me do it. I'm done anyway." Marcus's throat tightened. "You're not expendable, Sarge. None of you are. This is on me." Before the argument could continue, the shadow stepped forward, placing a gloved hand on Marcus's shoulder. In that instant, a flood of emotion surged between them. Understanding, gratitude, and sorrow. Marcus realized the shadow was offering to make the sacrifice itself. It had been bound to this place for centuries, and now it was ready to fulfill its duty one final time. Marcus's chest ached with a mixture of relief and grief. "Thank you," he whispered, knowing the being could hear him without words. The mercenaries burst into the chamber then, their leader shouting orders as they fanned out. Gunfire erupted, bullets sparking off the stone. Marcus's unit returned fire in controlled bursts, conserving what little ammunition they had left. The shadow became a whirlwind of darkness and steel, cutting through enemy ranks with terrifying precision. Marcus fired alongside it, feeling their movements align as if they were two halves of the same warrior. Still, there were too many enemies, and for every mercenary that fell, two more took their place. Marcus shouted for his men to fall back toward the tunnel, covering their retreat with desperate, pinpoint shots. "Go," he roared. "Get out now." Cole hesitated, tears streaming down his face. "Sir, we can't just leave you. That's an order." Marcus bellowed, his voice breaking. Jackson grabbed Cole and dragged him toward the exit, Reyes limping beside them. Marcus turned back to see the shadow standing in the center of the glowing carvings, its cloak billowing as it raised both arms. The ground trembled violently, cracks spider-webbing across the chamber floor. The cube on the pedestal pulsed brighter and brighter, filling the cavern with blinding light. The mercenaries screamed in terror as the stone beneath them began to collapse, swallowing them whole. Marcus stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. He caught one final glimpse of the shadow turning its hooded face toward him, a silent farewell passing between them. Marcus sprinted for the tunnel, his lungs burning, the world collapsing behind him. He dove through the passage just as a thunderous roar shook the earth. A wave of dust and heat blasted past him, and when he finally dared to look back, the tunnel entrance was gone, sealed beneath tons of rock. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Marcus lay there for a long moment, gasping, his body trembling from exhaustion and grief. Behind him, Cole, Jackson and Reyes staggered to their feet, their faces pale and streaked with tears. "It's over," Cole whispered, his voice hollow. Marcus stared at the sealed tunnel, his chest aching. "No," he said softly. "It's not over. That thing down there saved us, and the world. We owe it everything." He turned to his men, his expression hardening. "We get to a safe point, we call in reinforcements, and we make sure no one ever comes near this place again." As they limped away into the darkness, Marcus swore silently that the Shadow's sacrifice would not be in vain. Yet deep in his heart, he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were not finished crossing, that somewhere, somehow, the Shadow was still watching. The night air outside the ravine was heavy with the scent of smoke and damp earth, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness Marcus and his men had just escaped. The sky was painted with streaks of red and orange from distant fires as enemy flares lit up the horizon, casting eerie shadows that danced across the broken terrain. Marcus stumbled forward, his legs trembling from exhaustion, every muscle in his body screaming for rest, but he refused to slow down. Cole limped beside Jackson, who supported most of his weight, while Reyes staggered behind, pale and barely conscious. They had escaped the collapsing cavern by a margin of seconds, but the image of the Shadow's final stand burned in Marcus's mind like a brand. The memory of its silent farewell was something he could not shake, and though he told himself it was gone, a small part of him clung to the impossible hope that it might somehow have survived. The group moved through the sparse cover of boulders and twisted trees, trying to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the sealed underground chamber. Marcus knew reinforcements would be converging on the area soon, both friendly and hostile, and the last thing he wanted was to be caught in the crossfire with his team in such a weakened state. After an hour of grueling travel, they reached a narrow creek that wound its way through a dense thicket of scrub trees. Marcus called a halt, allowing the men to collapse onto the damp ground. Cole groaned as Jackson lowered him carefully, his injured legs stretched out in front of him. Reyes slumped against a tree trunk, his breathing shallow but steady. Marcus crouched beside him, checking his pulse and bandages. "You're still with us, Sarge?" Marcus said quietly, relief mingling with worry. Reyes managed a weak smile. "Barely, Captain. I feel like death warmed over." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You're not dying on me tonight. Not after everything we just went through." He turned to Jackson. "Get on the radio. See if we can raise anyone on our frequency." Jackson dug through his pack, pulling out the battered field radio and adjusting the knobs. Static filled the air, followed by faint bursts of distorted voices. After several tense moments, a clear signal broke through. "This is Falcon 1, repeat, Falcon 1, calling any Allied units in the sector. Identify yourselves." Marcus snatched the radio. "Falcon 1, this is Delta Team, Captain Marcus Hayes reporting. We have 3 wounded, minimal supplies and enemy forces in pursuit. Request immediate extraction and medical evac." There was a pause, then the voice returned, sharper now. "Delta Team, confirm your location and status. We've been tracking heavy enemy movement near your last known position." Marcus gave their coordinates, his voice clipped. "We're about 2 clicks east of a collapsed cave system. Hostiles were attempting to retrieve an unidentified artifact. The site has been sealed. Repeat, the site is sealed." Silence stretched for several seconds, then Falcon 1 responded with a note of urgency. "Copy that, Delta. Extraction team inbound, ETA 30 minutes. Hold position and stay hidden. Enemy units are sweeping the area." Marcus handed the radio back to Jackson, his mind churning. 30 minutes felt like an eternity, especially with the mercenaries still hunting them. He glanced at Cole, who was staring blankly at the ground, his face pale and drawn. "You holding up, kid?" Marcus asked. Cole blinked, then gave a shaky nod. "Yes, sir. I keep seeing it, you know? That thing. The way it moved, the way it protected us." His voice cracked. It wasn't human, but it wasn't a monster either. Marcus's throat tightened. It was a soldier in its own way. A guardian. It did what we do, It fought so others wouldn't have to. Cole swallowed hard, tears glistening in his eyes. Do you think it's really gone? Marcus looked away, staring into the darkness. I don't know. But if it's not, then it's still watching over us. The moment was shattered by the sudden crack of a gunshot. A bullet whizzed past Marcus's head, striking the tree beside Reyes with a splintering thud. Incoming! Marcus shouted, diving for cover. Shadows burst from the brush as enemy soldiers swarmed their position, their rifles blazing. Marcus returned fire in controlled bursts, cursing their dwindling ammo. Jackson dragged Cole behind a fallen log while Reyes struggled to lift his pistol, his hands shaking. The mercenaries were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. Marcus realized grimly that this was no random patrol. They were hunting him specifically, desperate to capture the only witnesses to what had transpired in the cavern. We can't hold them here. Jackson yelled over the gunfire. Marcus scanned the terrain, his mind racing. They needed to buy time until extraction arrived. Then he saw it, a narrow choke point between two large boulders that could serve as a temporary defensive position. Fall back to the rocks, he ordered. Move, move, move. He fired a covering burst as his men scrambled toward the choke point. Cole cried out as his injured leg caught on a root, but Jackson hauled him upright, gritting his teeth against the strain. Reyes stumbled, nearly collapsing, but Marcus grabbed him under the arm and dragged him forward. As they reached the rocks, Marcus positioned his men strategically, forcing the mercenaries to funnel through the narrow gap. The firefight intensified, bullets sparking off stone as Marcus and Jackson held the line. Cole, despite his injury, managed to reload and provide suppressing fire, his face twisted in determination. Reyes, barely conscious, fired single shots with deadly accuracy, each one dropping an enemy soldier. Still, it wasn't enough. The enemy pressed harder, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the small unit. Marcus's heart sank as he realized they couldn't hold out much longer. Then, without warning, the ground trembled. A deep, resonant sound filled the air, one Marcus recognized instantly. His eyes widened in disbelief as a dark shape rose from the tall grass beyond the enemy lines. It was the Shadow, its cloak billowing like smoke, its movements as swift and silent as ever. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. The mercenaries faltered, their fear palpable. Then the Shadow struck. It moved through the enemy ranks like a living storm, blades flashing, bodies falling. Panic erupted as the mercenaries broke formation, some fleeing, others firing wildly in terror. Marcus and his men seized the moment, pouring what little ammunition they had left into the chaos. It's alive, Cole whispered in awe, his voice trembling. It survived. Marcus didn't respond, his focus entirely on the battle. The Shadow fought with a renewed ferocity as if fueled by rage and purpose. Within minutes, the once overwhelming enemy force was reduced to a scattered handful of survivors who fled into the night, their screams echoing through the darkness. When the last gunshot faded, silence descended once more. The Shadow stood amidst the carnage, its chest heaving as though it too felt the strain of battle. Marcus lowered his rifle slowly, his mind reeling. You came back, he said softly. The Shadow turned its hooded head toward him, and though no words were spoken, Marcus felt its message clearly in his mind. The fight isn't over. Before Marcus could respond, the distant whine of helicopter rotors filled the air. Falcon 1 was arriving. Marcus turned to his men. This is our ticket out. Move. With the Shadow watching silently from the edge of the clearing, Marcus and his team signaled. The extraction helicopter with a flare. As the bird descended, kicking up a whirlwind of dust and debris, Marcus helped Reyes aboard while Jackson lifted Cole inside. Once everyone was secure, Marcus climbed in last, glancing back at the Shadow. It stood motionless, a dark sentinel against the night. For a brief moment their eyes met, and Marcus felt an unspoken promise pass between them. Then the helicopter lifted off, leaving the Shadow behind as it vanished into the darkness below. As they rose into the sky, Cole turned to Marcus, his voice trembling with both fear and wonder. Sir, what happens now? Marcus stared out the open door, his expression grim. Now we make sure the world never learns what's buried here, he said. And we prepare because whatever that thing is guarding, others will come looking for it. And next time, we might not have a guardian to save us. The helicopter roared through the night sky, its blades slicing the air with a rhythmic thrum that seemed to echo Marcus's pounding heartbeat. Inside the cabin, the dim red emergency lights cast long shadows over the exhausted faces of the surviving soldiers. Cole sat slumped against the wall, his injured leg hastily bandaged, his eyes wide and unfocused as if he were replaying the night's events on an endless loop. Jackson sat beside him, gripping his rifle tightly despite his trembling hands, while Reyes lay on a stretcher, pale and barely conscious, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Marcus sat opposite them, his back rigid, staring out the open door at the black void of the wilderness below. The wind whipped through his hair, carrying the acrid stench of smoke and gunpowder. He couldn't shake the image of the shadow standing alone in that clearing, its silent presence etched into his mind like a brand. They had survived, but the battle was far from over. As the helicopter banked sharply, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain Hayes, we're 10 minutes out from the forward operating base. Be advised, command has been monitoring enemy chatter. They're regrouping and furious about something. Looks like they know their mission failed." Marcus's jaw tightened. "They'll be back. They won't stop until they get what they came for." He glanced at his men, his voice firm despite the exhaustion weighing him down. "Whatever happens next, we don't speak a word about what we saw tonight. Not to anyone. Understood?" Cole blinked, confused. "Sir, you mean, even our own command?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Especially them. The fewer people who know about that artifact, the safer everyone will be." The helicopter touched down at the base in a storm of dust and noise. Medics rushed forward, lifting Reyes onto a stretcher and hustling him toward the infirmary while other personnel helped Cole and Jackson disembark. Marcus followed last, his boots crunching on the gravel as he scanned the perimeter. The base was buzzing with activity, soldiers moving with urgent precision, vehicles rumbling in and out. He was met by Colonel Whitaker, a grizzled veteran with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Hayes," Whitaker barked, striding forward. "What the hell happened out there? We lost all contact with your team for hours. Intel shows massive enemy movement in your AO and then suddenly, nothing. Just radio silence and a spike in seismic activity. You want to explain that?" Marcus's mind raced. He couldn't tell the colonel the truth, not about the shadow, not about the artifact. He snapped to attention, his face a mask of professionalism. "Sir, our mission was compromised by heavy enemy resistance. They were better equipped than we anticipated. We engaged, took heavy casualties and fell back. During the retreat, the enemy triggered explosives that caused a cave-in. Whatever they were after was destroyed in the collapse." Whitaker's eyes narrowed. "And you're sure about that?" Marcus forced himself to hold the colonel's gaze. "Positive, sir. The site is sealed. Nothing survived." Whitaker studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Fine. We'll debrief in detail once your men are stabilized. Get cleaned up and report to my office at 0900. With that, he turned and stalked away, barking orders at nearby soldiers. As Marcus watched him go, Cole limped up beside him, his expression troubled. "Sir, lying to command. Are we really doing the right thing?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked around at the bustling base, at the young, inexperienced soldiers going about their duties, oblivious to the horrors lurking beneath the surface of their mission. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "Cole, if they knew what we found down there, it would start a war. Governments, corporations, warlords, they'd all fight to control it. Millions would die. Sometimes the truth is too dangerous to share." Cole swallowed hard, nodding reluctantly. "I trust you, sir. I can't stop thinking about it. About the shadow." Marcus's throat tightened. "Neither can I." Over the next 2 days, the unit was treated for their injuries and debriefed extensively by military intelligence officers. Marcus stuck to his fabricated story, and to his relief, his men followed suit, though he could see the strain it caused them. Reyes was stabilized but remained unconscious most of the time, his recovery uncertain. Jackson kept busy by helping around the base, but Cole grew quieter and more withdrawn, his eyes haunted. Marcus himself barely slept, plagued by vivid dreams of the underground chamber, of the cube's pulsating light, and of the shadow's final stand. On the third night, he awoke in a cold sweat, convinced for a moment that he could hear the same deep, resonant hum that had filled the cavern. Shaking it off, he went to check on his men, only to find Cole missing from his bunk. Panic surged through Marcus as he searched the base. He finally found Cole near the perimeter fence, staring out into the darkness beyond the floodlights. "Cole!" Marcus barked, striding toward him. The young soldier flinched, then turned, his face pale and drawn. "Sir, I couldn't sleep. I keep feeling like it's out there. Watching." Marcus's stomach twisted. "The shadow?" Cole nodded miserably. "Yeah, but not in a bad way. More like, it's waiting for something. For us." Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. Listen to me, Cole. That thing saved our lives, but it belongs to another world, one we don't understand. Our job is to make sure no one else gets near it. You need to let it go. Cole hesitated, then nodded, though Marcus could tell he wasn't convinced. At dawn, Colonel Whitaker summoned Marcus to his office. The colonel's face was grim as he gestured to a map spread across his desk. Hayes, we've intercepted some enemy communications. They're regrouping faster than we expected, and they're bringing in reinforcements from outside the region. Whatever they were after, they're not done trying to get it. I need you to take a new team and scout the area. Marcus's blood ran cold. Returning to that cursed place was the last thing he wanted. Sir, with respect, my men need time to recover. We barely made it out alive last time. Whitaker's gaze hardened. I understand, but we don't have time. If the enemy secures whatever they were after, this entire theater could collapse. You're the only one with first-hand knowledge of the terrain. Marcus realized he had no choice. Yes, sir, he said stiffly. Later that day, Marcus broke the news to his surviving men. Jackson took it stoically, but Cole's reaction was immediate and visceral. We can't go back there, he shouted, his voice cracking. Sir, we saw what's down there. If we go back, we won't come out again. Marcus met his gaze steadily. I won't ask you to come, Cole. You're injured and need rest. But I need you to trust me to finish this. Cole shook his head, tears brimming in his eyes. It's not just the enemy, sir. It's the shadow. I think it's calling us back. That night, as Marcus prepared his gear, a sudden power outage plunged the base into darkness. Shouts erupted as soldiers scrambled to restore generators. Marcus grabbed his rifle and headed toward the command center, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. Then he heard it, a deep, resonant hum growing louder. His blood ran cold. It was the same sound from the cavern. Bursting into the open courtyard, he saw a dark shape materializing in the swirling dust and smoke. The shadow stood there, taller and more imposing than before, its presence radiating power and urgency. Soldiers froze in terror, some raising their weapons, others backing away. Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. You followed us here, he whispered. The shadow's glowing eyes locked onto his, and suddenly Marcus's mind was flooded with images. Enemy convoys moving toward the sealed chamber, powerful weapons being assembled, and a vision of the cube shattering its bindings, unleashing chaos. Marcus staggered, gasping. The shadow's message was clear. They weren't just guarding the artifact anymore. The enemy had found a way to break the seal, and if they succeeded, the world would burn. Marcus turned to his stunned men, his voice hoarse but commanding. Gear up. We move out now. This isn't over. It's just beginning. Marcus stood frozen for a split second as the shadow's glowing eyes burned into his mind, the images it had shared still flashing like a storm behind his eyelids. His breath came in ragged gasps, his heart hammering in his chest, but there was no time to process the fear clawing at him. Around him, chaos erupted as soldiers shouted, some scrambling for weapons, others backing away in terror from the dark, towering figure that had appeared in their midst. Stand down. Marcus bellowed, his voice cutting through the din like a whip crack. Do not engage. That's an order. The troops hesitated, rifles wavering uncertainly, their eyes wide with confusion and dread. Marcus knew they didn't understand and maybe they never would, but if a single bullet was fired at the shadow, they were all dead. The humming sound intensified, reverberating through the base like the growl of some ancient beast, making the very ground tremble. The shadow didn't move aggressively. Instead, it raised a single elongated arm and pointed toward the east, toward the dark line of mountains silhouetted against the faint pre-dawn light. Marcus understood immediately. The enemy was already on the move, and they had less time than he feared. He turned sharply to his men. Gear up now. Cole, Jackson, get Reyes ready for evac. I want 2 Humvees prepped and rolling in 5 minutes. Cole, pale and trembling, stammered, Sir, Reyes isn't ready to move, he's barely stable. Marcus cut him off with a glare. We don't have a choice. If the enemy breaches that site, none of us will live long enough to worry about recovery. Move. Cole swallowed hard and nodded, sprinting toward the infirmary. Marcus spun back toward the shadow. You're coming with us, aren't you? He asked in a low voice meant only for the creature. The shadow gave no verbal response, but its head tilted slightly, and then it simply dissolved into the ground like smoke being pulled into the earth, vanishing from sight. Marcus shivered but forced himself to focus. He didn't know what kind of ally the shadow truly was, but it had saved them once before. The base buzzed with frenzied activity as engines roared to life and soldiers scrambled into formation. Colonel Whitaker stormed into the courtyard, his face thunderous. "Pace. What the hell is going on here? Why are my men in a panic and why did the power just fail across half the base?" Marcus met the colonel halfway, his expression grim. "Sir, the enemy is moving fast. They're headed for the sealed site and they have the firepower to breach it. If they succeed, they'll unleash something none of us can control. I'm leading a strike team to intercept." Whitaker's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You are going to explain to me right now what exactly is happening, Captain?" Marcus lowered his voice, stepping closer. "Sir, with respect, there's no time. If we don't stop them, this whole region, and maybe far beyond, will be consumed. Trust me." Whitaker stared at him for a long, tense moment. Then, with a sharp nod, he relented. "Fine. But if this goes south, Hayes, it's on you. Bring my men home." Marcus saluted crisply before sprinting to the waiting Humvee. They rolled out just as the first hints of dawn tinged the horizon. Marcus rode in the lead vehicle beside Jackson, scanning the rugged terrain ahead through the windshield. Cole sat in the back seat, clutching his rifle tightly, while Reyes lay strapped to a stretcher, his face pale but determined. The second vehicle followed close behind, loaded with additional soldiers who had volunteered for the mission, their faces set with grim resolve despite the fear in their eyes. The convoy bounced and jolted over rocky ground, the air thick with tension. After several miles of silence, Cole finally spoke, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. "Sir, that thing back at the base. It was trying to warn us, wasn't it? Like before." Marcus didn't take his eyes off the road. "It wasn't just a warning. It was showing me what will happen if the enemy succeeds. The cube, it's more than just a relic. It's a prison. Whatever's inside isn't meant to be free." Jackson swore under his breath. "So we're not just fighting soldiers. We're fighting to keep, what, some kind of monster locked up?" Marcus's jaw clenched. "Something like that." Hours passed as they pushed deeper into enemy-controlled territory. They could see smoke rising on the horizon, and Marcus's gut twisted with dread. Through binoculars, he spotted a convoy of enemy trucks and armored vehicles moving rapidly toward the mountains. "There they are," he muttered. "They've got a big head start. If they reach the site before us." He didn't finish the thought. Grabbing the radio, he barked. "Second vehicle, split off and flank them from the south. Lay down suppressive fire when we make contact. No mercy, no hesitation." A crackle of acknowledgement came back. The two vehicles parted ways, engines roaring as they surged forward. Moments later, they crested a ridge and came face to face with the enemy convoy. Marcus didn't wait for orders to be questioned. "Fire," he roared. Machine guns erupted, tracers slicing through the morning light. The enemy scrambled, returning fire with heavy weapons that tore chunks of rock from the hillside. The battlefield became a storm of noise and chaos. Marcus leaned out the window, firing controlled bursts from his rifle. Shouting commands over the din. Explosions rocked the ground as grenades detonated, flipping one of the enemy trucks into a fiery wreck. Jackson swerved violently to avoid debris, nearly losing control. "We can't hold them here," he yelled. Marcus scanned the terrain, spotting a narrow canyon ahead. "Head for that canyon. We'll funnel them in and choke their advance." The plan worked, temporarily. The narrow passage limited the enemy's ability to maneuver, allowing Marcus's team to inflict heavy losses. But the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. For every truck they destroyed, two more seemed to appear. Marcus realized grimly that they couldn't win a prolonged firefight. Just as he was about to order a retreat, the ground beneath them began to tremble. A low, familiar hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. Cole gasped. "It's here." The shadow. From the canyon floor, tendrils of darkness erupted, snaking around enemy vehicles and ripping them apart like toys. Soldiers screamed as they were dragged into the swirling blackness. Marcus stared in awe and terror as the shadow rose from the ground, towering over the battlefield, its form shifting and writhing. It didn't attack Marcus's team. Instead, it focused solely on the enemy, tearing through their ranks with unstoppable fury. Seizing the opportunity, Marcus shouted, "Push forward. This is our chance." They surged ahead, weaving through the chaos toward the mountains. Behind them, the shadows' rampage decimated what remained of the enemy force, buying them precious time. As they neared the base of the mountain range, Marcus felt a cold knot of fear tighten in his gut. The sealed chamber was close now, too close. He could already see signs of enemy excavation, heavy machinery, hastily constructed barricades, and a massive drill positioned over a jagged fissure in the rock. Even worse, he could see enemy soldiers unloading strange, glowing devices that pulsed with a sickly light. The sight made his skin crawl. They're not just breaching the seal, Marcus realized aloud. They figured out how to destabilize it completely. They didn't have time for subtlety. Marcus ordered his men to open fire, and the final battle erupted in a storm of bullets and explosions. Jackson covered Marcus as he charged forward, taking down enemy engineers before they could activate their devices. Cole, despite his injuries, fought with desperate ferocity, his rifle blazing. Reyes, propped up against a rock, provided sniper cover with deadly precision. The fighting was brutal and close quarters, every second a struggle for survival. Marcus reached the drill and planted explosives, setting a timer with trembling hands. "We destroy this, we buy the world more time," he shouted. Just then, a massive enemy soldier wielding a heavy machine gun charged him. Marcus barely dodged the hail of bullets, grappling with the man in a vicious hand-to-hand struggle. The soldier was stronger, but Marcus fought with raw determination, finally driving his knife into the enemy's throat. As the man fell, Marcus staggered back, blood-smeared and gasping. He glanced up just in time to see the shadow materialize beside him, its glowing eyes fixed on the fisher. The hum reached a deafening pitch as cracks spread across the rock like spiderwebs. The seal was breaking. Marcus screamed into his radio, "Everyone fall back. Now!" His men began a desperate retreat as the ground shook violently, debris raining down from above. Marcus stayed behind just long enough to trigger the detonator, the drill erupting in a fiery explosion that consumed the enemy camp. As he ran, he felt the shadow's presence beside him, a silent guardian in the maelstrom. Together, they fled the collapsing mountainside, knowing that this victory was only temporary, and that the true battle was yet to come. Marcus stumbled through the choking smoke and falling debris, his lungs burning with every breath as he sprinted down the collapsing mountainside. Behind him, the massive explosion he'd set off ripped through the enemy excavation site, sending a towering column of fire and dust into the sky. The ground bucked and heaved beneath his feet like a living thing, throwing him off balance. He hit the rocky ground hard, pain lancing through his ribs, but he forced himself up, knowing that to stop even for a second was death. Around him, his men fought their way out of the chaos, Cole dragging Reyes by the straps of his vest while Jackson fired covering bursts at the few remaining enemy soldiers still resisting. The shadow glided silently beside them, its massive form flickering like dark lightning, tendrils lashing out to crush any enemy who came too close. Marcus risked a glance backward and his blood turned to ice. The fissure at the center of the excavation was widening, glowing veins of pale blue light spiderwebbing outward from it. The humming that had haunted his nightmares now rose to a deafening roar, a sound so deep and primal it rattled his bones. Whatever had been imprisoned beneath the mountains was fighting to break free, and their explosives hadn't been enough to stop it. "Move. Move. We're out of time," Marcus bellowed, his voice hoarse over the cacophony. Cole, panting and wild-eyed, shouted back, "Sir, the Humvees are gone. We'll never make it out on foot." Marcus's mind raced. There was no way they could outrun this on foot, not with Reyes barely conscious and the terrain working against them. Then his gaze fell on the shadow and a desperate idea took hold. "Cover me," he shouted to Jackson as he sprinted toward the towering figure. The shadow turned its glowing eyes toward him, unreadable. Marcus skidded to a stop in front of it, his chest heaving. "You brought us here for a reason. If you want this thing contained, help us." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the shadow's tendrils whipped outward, wrapping around Marcus and his men in a cocoon of darkness. Cole screamed in terror, but Marcus shouted, "Hold on," before everything went black. When Marcus opened his eyes, he was sprawled on the ground in an entirely different location. The world was unnaturally silent, the only sound the ragged breathing of his team. They were lying in a dense forest, miles from the mountain range, the rising sun filtering through the trees. Reyes groaned weakly, but he was alive. Cole sat up abruptly, clutching his head. What the hell just happened? Where are we? Marcus staggered to his feet, scanning their surroundings. "I think it teleported us," he said slowly, still trying to wrap his mind around it. Jackson looked around warily. "Where is it now?" Marcus turned in a slow circle, but there was no sign of the shadow. It had vanished as suddenly as it appeared. A deep unease settled in Marcus's gut. "It's gone," he said quietly, though he couldn't shake the feeling that it was still watching somehow. Cole suddenly pointed to the sky, his voice trembling. "Sir, look." Marcus followed his gaze and felt his heart seize. In the distance, A massive plume of blue light shot into the heavens from the direction of the mountains. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and even at this distance, Marcus could hear the faint echo of that terrible humming. "The seal didn't hold," Marcus whispered. "We didn't stop it. We only delayed it." He clenched his fists. "We need to get back to base and warn command." The trek through the forest was grueling. They had no vehicles, limited supplies, and Reyes was fading fast. Marcus and Jackson took turns carrying him while Cole scouted ahead, though the younger soldier seemed increasingly agitated. His hands shook constantly, and he kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting the shadow to reappear. "It's not gone," he muttered under his breath at one point, his voice almost delirious. "It saved us because it needs us. It's using us." Marcus tried to reassure him, though he didn't fully believe his own words. "Cole, focus. Whatever its motives, it's our only chance to survive this. Stay sharp." But deep down Marcus was starting to suspect that Cole might be right. 2 days later, filthy and exhausted, they finally stumbled back into their forward operating base. The guards at the gate rushed to help them, their expressions a mix of shock and relief. Word of their mission's failure had already reached the base and morale was low. Colonel Whitaker stormed into the infirmary as Reyes was being treated, his face red with fury. "Pace. I sent you to stop the enemy, and now I've got reports of seismic disturbances so big they're showing up on civilian sensors. What the hell happened out there?" Marcus straightened, every muscle aching. "Sir, the enemy was using advanced tech to destabilize the site. We destroyed their equipment, but it wasn't enough. Something ancient and dangerous was imprisoned beneath those mountains. It's waking up." Whitaker stared at him, disbelief warring with anger. "You expect me to believe this supernatural nonsense? You're a soldier, Hayes, not a storyteller." Marcus took a step closer, his voice deadly serious. "Sir, I don't care what you believe. I've seen it with my own eyes. If we don't act fast, the enemy will harness that thing's power, and nothing on this planet will be able to stop them." Whitaker opened his mouth to retort, but a sudden alarm blared through the base. Soldiers shouted, sprinting to defensive positions. A young officer burst into the room, pale with fear. "Colonel, we've got incoming. Enemy drones, fast movers, and, sir, there's something else with them. We don't know what it is." Whitaker swore and turned to Marcus. "Get your men ready. If this is connected to whatever nightmare you stirred up out there, you're going to clean up the mess." Marcus didn't argue. He grabbed his gear and rallied Cole and Jackson. Reyes, though weak, insisted on joining them, strapping on a sidearm with trembling hands. Marcus considered arguing but saw the determination in his eyes and relented. As they raced to the perimeter, the sky darkened unnaturally. A massive shape blotted out the sun, descending toward the base. Marcus's stomach dropped as he realized what it was. A colossal fragment of the mountains, floating as if weightless, crackling with the same blue energy that had seeped from the fissure. Enemy drones swarmed around it like angry hornets, raining fire on the base. Anti-aircraft guns roared to life, but their fire barely scratched the massive object. Marcus shouted orders, directing his team to key defensive positions. Explosions ripped through the compound as enemy ground forces breached the outer defenses. The base became a hellscape of smoke, fire, and screams. In the midst of the chaos, Marcus saw something even more terrifying. Emerging from beneath the floating mass came a figure, a humanoid shape wreathed in blue light, its features shifting and incomprehensible. It radiated raw power, and every instinct in Marcus's body screamed that this was the entity the cube had been imprisoning. The enemy soldiers fell to their knees in worship, chanting in a language Marcus didn't recognize. The figure raised one hand, and a wave of energy blasted outward, annihilating an entire defensive line in an instant. "Fall back to the inner compound," Marcus roared, dragging Cole by the arm. But Cole resisted, his face pale and eyes wide with something like awe. "Sir, don't you see? It's beautiful. It's what the shadow was protecting us from. We have to understand it." Marcus shook him hard. "Cole, snap out of it. That thing will kill us all." But Cole tore free, stumbling toward the entity as if in a trance. Marcus lunged after him, but a massive explosion separated them, hurling Marcus backward. Dazed and bleeding, Marcus looked up just in time to see the shadow reappear, rising from the ground between Cole and the glowing figure. The two entities faced each other like ancient rivals, the air vibrating with their clash of power. Soldiers on both sides froze, unable to comprehend the titanic confrontation unfolding before them. The shadow struck first, tendrils lashing out to wrap around the glowing figure. The figure countered with a burst of blue energy that shattered nearby buildings and sent shockwaves rippling through the base. Marcus shielded his face from flying debris, shouting for his men to retreat. As the two beings battled, Marcus realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't just a fight for their survival. It was a war that had been raging for eons, and they were caught in the middle. If the shadow lost, the world would follow. The ground shook violently as the two titans clashed, the shadow's tendrils whipping through the air like living spears while the glowing figure radiated pulses of destructive energy that blasted apart anything in their path. Marcus felt the force of their battle deep in his bones, a primal terror that went beyond fear of death. This wasn't just combat, it was the collision of ancient powers far older than humanity. He forced himself to his feet, coughing through the thick smoke as he searched desperately for his men. Jackson emerged from the rubble, blood streaming down his face, dragging Reyes by the arm. Reyes's breathing was shallow, his skin pale, but he was conscious. "Marcus!" Jackson shouted over the chaos, his voice hoarse. "Cole's gone." He ran straight toward that thing. "I tried to stop him." Marcus's gut twisted in dread. Cole was already unstable after everything they'd been through, and now he was in the worst possible place, between two forces that could annihilate him without even noticing. Marcus grabbed his rifle and scanned the battlefield, finally spotting Cole near the epicenter of the clash. The young soldier was on his knees, staring up at the glowing entity with a look of rapture on his face. Marcus's heart pounded. "Cole, get away from there," he roared, sprinting toward him. But before he could reach him, a wave of blue energy erupted from the glowing figure, hurling Marcus backward like a rag doll. He slammed into the ground, pain exploding through his body, his vision going white for a moment. When it cleared, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The glowing figure had turned its attention fully on Cole. The chanting enemy soldiers were now silent, watching in awe as the entity extended a hand toward him. Cole rose unsteadily to his feet, tears streaming down his face. "It's speaking to me," he whispered, though Marcus couldn't hear the words. "It understands me. It's not our enemy, sir. It wants to save us." Marcus staggered upright, shouting desperately, "Cole, that thing isn't saving anyone. It's using you. Don't listen to it." But Cole didn't seem to hear. He reached out toward the entity, and the air between them shimmered like heat haze. Suddenly, the shadow lunged, its tendrils wrapping around both Cole and the glowing figure. Cole screamed, the sound tearing through Marcus like a physical blow. The glowing figure retaliated, unleashing a burst of power so intense it blasted the shadow back several meters, creating a crater where they'd stood. Cole collapsed, unmoving, while the two ancient beings faced off once more. Marcus's mind raced. If the shadow failed here, the glowing figure would be free to destroy everything, and conventional weapons wouldn't make a difference. He thought of the cube, of the underground chamber, and of the vision the shadow had shown him. The prison shattering, the world burning. There had to be a way to contain the entity again, but how? Then he remembered the strange glowing devices the enemy had been using to destabilize the seal. If they could reverse the process, maybe they could trap the entity instead. Marcus sprinted back to Jackson and Reyes. "We need those devices," he shouted. Jackson's eyes widened. "You mean the ones in the enemy camp?" "They're all over the battlefield, sir. How the hell are we supposed to get to them?" Marcus grabbed his shoulder, his grip fierce. "We don't need all of them. Just one, maybe two. Enough to create a temporary seal. Cover me." Without waiting for an answer, he charged toward the nearest cluster of wreckage where enemy soldiers lay dead or dying around the strange machines. Bullets whizzed past him as surviving enemies tried to stop him, but Marcus moved like a man possessed, gunning them down with brutal efficiency. He reached one of the devices, a compact, pulsating cylinder, and ripped it free from its housing. It vibrated violently in his hands, the glow intensifying as if sensing the chaos around it. Jackson appeared at his side moments later, hauling a second device. "Got one?" he yelled. Marcus nodded, his mind already working through the plan. "We're going to set these between the two entities. When they clash again, the energy will feed into the devices and trigger a feedback loop. It should trap them both, at least temporarily." Jackson gave him a wild look. "Should? That's all you've got?" Marcus grimaced. "It's better than nothing." They sprinted back toward the center of the battlefield, where the shadow and the glowing figure were locked in a terrifying stalemate. The shadow's form flickered and wavered as if it were weakening, while the glowing figure seemed to grow stronger, its light blinding. Marcus set his device on the ground and began frantically adjusting the settings, his fingers flying over unfamiliar controls. Come on," he muttered through gritted teeth. Jackson crouched beside him, providing cover fire as enemy soldiers closed in from all sides. "Sir, we've got incoming," Jackson shouted. Marcus didn't look up. "Just buy me 30 more seconds." Suddenly, a guttural scream cut through the noise. Marcus looked up to see Cole staggering toward them, his face bloodied but alive. "Cole, you're alive," Marcus shouted, relief flooding him. But Cole's expression was strange, almost serene. "I saw it," he said, his voice eerily calm amid the chaos. "I saw everything. The shadow isn't just protecting us, it's part of the prison. It sacrificed itself to keep that thing locked away." Marcus's mind reeled. "Then we have to help it finish the job." Cole nodded weakly and collapsed beside Marcus, his hands fumbling to assist with the device. "It needs an anchor," he gasped. "Someone to hold the seal in place." Marcus froze. "What do you mean, an anchor?" Cole met his gaze, his eyes filled with both fear and acceptance. "It has to be a living conduit. If we don't, the seal won't hold. One of us has to stay behind." Before Marcus could protest, the ground shook violently as the glowing figure broke free of the shadow's grasp and unleashed a devastating attack. The shadow reeled, its form splintering like smoke torn apart by a hurricane. Marcus knew they were out of time. He slammed the final switch on the device and a high-pitched whine filled the air. A shimmering dome of energy began to form, encasing the two entities. The glowing figure roared in fury, its voice a sound of pure rage and destruction. The shadow, in contrast, turned its gaze on Marcus. For the first time, Marcus felt a strange sense of connection, as if the shadow were thanking him. Then Cole shoved Marcus backward with surprising strength. "Go, sir. Get them out of here. This is my choice." Marcus scrambled to his feet, horror dawning. Cole and no. But it was too late. Cole grabbed the device with both hands and plunged himself into the heart of the energy field. His body arched, glowing with unbearable light as the seal activated fully. The dome snapped shut like a trap, and in an instant both the shadow and the glowing figure were gone, along with Cole. The battlefield fell eerily silent. Enemy soldiers dropped their weapons, stunned and leaderless. Marcus fell to his knees, staring at the spot where his soldier had just been. Jackson staggered over, his face pale. "Sir, is it over?" Marcus swallowed hard, tears burning his eyes. "For now," he said hoarsely. "Cole bought us time. That's all." They gathered Reyes and began the slow, painful trek back to what remained of their base. The floating mountain fragment had vanished along with the entities, leaving behind only devastation. When they arrived, Colonel Whitaker met them, his face a mixture of relief and shock. "Where's Cole?" he demanded. Marcus couldn't speak. He just handed Whitaker the inactive device, its glow completely gone. "He stayed behind," Marcus finally said, his voice breaking. Whitaker's expression softened slightly as he nodded, understanding the weight of the sacrifice. "We'll honor him," he said quietly. That night, Marcus stood alone on the ruined walls of the base, staring at the distant horizon. The world seemed deceptively calm, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the cycle began again. The seal would hold for now, but nothing lasted forever. As he turned to leave, a whisper of movement caught his eye. In the shadows cast by the moonlight, he thought he saw a familiar, dark silhouette watching him. For a moment, he dared to hope it was Cole, but then the figure dissolved into mist, leaving only silence. Marcus squared his shoulders, his grief hardening into resolve. The battle was over, but the war for humanity's survival was just beginning, and he would be ready when the darkness rose again. The end.